Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us on this Mindful Monday, where we love to be your resource for education, connections, collaborations to support you on your wellness journey. Because everybody is going through something. So our hope is that you are going to resonate with one or very many of our speakers so that you do not feel supported and that you're not alone because together we can truly do more. And I do need to take a minute to stop and thank my sponsors, Daniela, Wolfe, White Sands Premier Travel, Vibe, and BAM Metrics, because it's these sponsored appearances that helps make Mindful Mondays possible. So that being said, let's get started because you're going to love this lady that I have for you today. Daniela Wolfe, she has over 27 years of experience as a licensed master social worker, and she's dedicated her life to helping stressed and burnout professionals reclaim their time and energy. And she is a busy single mom, so she knows firsthand the chaos that life can throw your way. But she knows also that how to navigate them with grace and mindfulness. So she is here today to help you ditch the overwhelm. Daniela, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Laura. I'm excited to be here.
So can you maybe start by telling us a little bit about your personal journey through burnout and what that was that pivotal moment for you?
Yeah. So actually, my kids are older now, but I was a single mom almost 20 years ago. And, I was going through divorce. They were 4 and 6 months old. And we had this surprise October storm. We were without power for 5 days. I was trying to bail out my sump pump with a bucket. And, at the time, I wasn't great at asking for help. I felt like I needed to do it all, be it all to prove that I could, to show that I was capable, to not be a burden to anybody else. And I was irritable. I was snapping. I was just not who I knew I wanted to be and not who I wanted my kids to remember growing up. And I had just kind of a little meltdown moment, but I decided, that's when things were going to start to change was after that. So I did start asking for help. We had free childcare at the grocery store at the time, which was fantastic. I joined a gym that had childcare. I started just, taking some time to invest in myself in addition to my job and my kids and everybody else, and found not only was I showing up better and differently, but everybody else around me was benefiting too. And, we were having fun. We were doing more. People were sharing with me things they were doing to take time for themselves because of something I said, something I did. And I realized I think we're all looking for that validation and permission when it comes to putting ourselves back on our to-do list. And I just realized I kind of wanted to share that with as many people as I can to help people start living the life they want to lead now instead of waiting till the kids are older, till they have more time, till they retire, all those different things we need to wait for, and to start doing it now.
Yeah, there's so many things that you had said in there, which for one I can relate. And I don't know if you think, is it mostly women, do you find? Or I mean, I'm sure men, I know men get burnout too, but as far as that persona, because a lot of women that I know, we feel like we have to do it all or we take it on all. I don't know if it's because we're used to being able to take care of the household work, do all the juggling things. And I'm not saying men don't do that as well, but do you
Yeah.
think that's more prevalent with women or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, for whatever reason, we were taught, we could do whatever we wanted to do. We could do anything. But unfortunately, we kept on to everything we used to do, and now we're doing everything. And even when we're in a relationship with somebody, for whatever reason, women carry a lot of the mental load, the invisible load in the household of managing things when they have to get done, what has to get done. So even if somebody else helps with that third piece of executing the task, those first two pieces of recognizing and planning are still on our plate. And so learning, definitely I think men do deal with some of that, but are just conditioned to work through things in a different way. I think they carry less guilt sometimes, as well as they're just not always as comfortable working through it. So I see more women asking for help in this area, even if there's just as many men that need help in this area.
Yeah, and I was going to say, and that's not to say that men don't, and I don't know why our society like puts it that way, but because they do suffer from, everybody suffers from burnout normally,
Oh
one
yeah.
point or another.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times, again, it looks different. So we don't think it's the same. There's different expectations that we might internalize. And so being able to still work through it in that same way when I help people, we work on your mindset, your time planning, and then what you're doing for you. We all have different things to work through in our mindset, regardless of gender or anything like that.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and that's what I always say, everything looks different, feels different for each individual,
Mhm.
and maybe a lot of people are walking around and they don't even know what exactly is burnout, or maybe they feel like they're not burnout, they're just getting things done. So, what things have you noticed, or what are some of the unusual things that you've noticed that, are actually burnout that you've maybe noticed with yourself, with your clients?
Yeah, society has normalized this hustle culture. We've normalized being burnt out in some ways, being constantly busy. I don't know how many times I've asked or even been asked, oh, how are things going? And they're like, oh, good, just busy, and that's our new answer to things. And so we've normalized this culture of being busy, being stressed, being overwhelmed, and thinking, well, if everybody else is in the same boat, then I must be okay. Then it must be all right. And that's not necessarily the case. Just because we're all doing things that way doesn't mean it's okay. And so I think also, too, we sometimes think burnout comes from something we don't enjoy, but it's actually our passions that can set us up more for burnout than the things we don't like. You think of a job you don't like, 5 o'clock comes, you're like, bye, I'm out of there, versus something you love doing. You're like, hold on, I just want to do this for 10 more minutes. Give me 20 more minutes, because you get so wrapped up in it. And so when you toss your boundaries out the window that way, whether it's a job, your kids, a relationship, and you go all in without kind of coming up for air and doing anything else, can be very isolated because you're so focused on that one thing. You ride the highs and lows so much more intensely because that's your passion. That's where you're invested and all in. And so by being able to set some boundaries back in place, to take some time for you, your self-care, your hobbies, people, connections, and all sorts of other things, you actually end up more productive, more successful, more creative than if you just stay all in and focused.
Yeah, that's one thing I have found too. Of course, but you bring up a good point. I've never really related it to things that I'm passionate about. I guess because I'm passionate about it, I relate it to things that I really don't like. Because to me, that stands out more, right? Being burnt out if you really don't like it.
But you think, like if you loved, say, ice cream, if you had too much ice cream, it wouldn't be healthy for you. So our going, doing too much of something, even if it's something you're passionate about, is still unhealthy.
Yeah. So, what are some of the signs people should look out for?
Yeah, and it can definitely vary by person. I think definitely when you talk about burnout, being detached, having some cynicism, um, just losing all drive and motivation. There's a great analogy I heard when it comes to comparing stress and burnout. Imagine it like a bonfire. And so you have stress as your fire, and you keep putting more logs on, and the flame keeps growing brighter and brighter and burning hotter, and you keep putting more on, and that's where stress comes in. Burnout is that point afterwards where it's that gray embers. There's maybe, there's no fire left in it. Maybe you can put a little fan on it and it'll blow kind of glowing embers, but all the energy is gone. And that's really where that burnout is. You look at the energy from a fire, and when it's gone, that's that state of burnout. And so you've lost your motivation, your ability to just kind of feel invested in it. And it's definitely recoverable from by putting some simple steps in place. But I think sometimes we don't see the signs until we're too far gone, until we're at that place of burnout. Because again, like that stress, that bonfire, it feels good. It feels warm. It feels like you're doing something when you keep putting more on the fire, and not recognizing by taking a step back and taking that space, you'll actually end up doing more benefits than not.
Yeah, yeah, that definitely good points. But when you get your clients though, do you have any of them that are maybe like just on the edge, or are they normally in full blown burnout?
Some of them can be on the edge, and that can be a hard part too, because they can see where they're doing some good things and think like, okay, well, I've got these good things in place. I'm all set. Versus recognizing the bigger picture. Sometimes, it's kind of like our health. Even you think of physical health, we might have a couple aches and pains, but we ignore them until we are at that point where it's like, oh gosh, I've thrown my back out and I can't get off the couch. And it's the same thing with burnout. Just because you're in a good place doesn't mean you're totally out of the woods. And so I love to talk about mental fitness, even similar to physical fitness. It's not, we all have mental wellness, just like we have physical wellness. And so being able to see some of those parallels, you go to the gym, not because you're injured, but to help prevent injury, to build your strength, to build your resilience. And so a lot of these practices, you might be kind of teetering on the edge, but when you start to put them in place, you can build that resilience, build more health and wellness, build some sustainable things to keep you from going over that point.
So, what are some things that you would do for mental fitness?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's, three areas that I help with. It's definitely your mindset, your time planning, and your self-care. So when you're building your mental fitness, you kind of look at it the same way as you would physical fitness. Don't decide you're going to run a marathon and get off the couch and go do 26 miles at once. You start with something small and sustainable. You have to build these practices, because when you try and take on too much at once, it's hard to do, it's hard to sustain, and that's where then we get in those habits of stopping and starting, kind of like New Year's resolutions and that type of thing. So start with one small habit. I'd love to start with your mindset, because when you think differently, you feel differently. When you feel differently, you act differently. And so to start with that mindset can be the catalyst to then having your actions and your feelings kind of resonate more, rather than just doing the actions and not having the thoughts behind it. So when you look at your mindset, to think of what are some of the obstacles, what are some of the limiting beliefs, what are the things that are getting in the way from you doing the things that you want to do, that create some of that work-life balance, work-life flow, work-life harmony. Is it that you're treating everything like it's important and urgent? Do you feel like you have to do everything by yourself? Do you feel guilty for whether it's asking for help, taking time off? It varies by person, obviously, the different cultures we were raised in, the stories we tell ourselves, but to kind of see where are those thoughts coming up. An exercise sometimes is to have people actually sit and do nothing, and sit on the couch for 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and notice what are the thoughts that come up, like, oh, I should be doing something else, this is a waste of time. What are some of those thoughts you start to have? And that's where you can start to break them down, reframe them, and change the narrative and conversation so that you start to think about things differently.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. I was like, do you even get anyone to sit still for like 5 minutes with doing nothing? I mean, because
Mhm.
normally
No
if
phone,
they're
no.
grabbing an electronic, they're grabbing
Yep.
something. So yeah, when you work with them, do you ever just like take all that way and just being quiet and have them sit for 5 minutes and let them tell you what's coming up? Or
Yeah, or have them start journaling it and start writing it down. Some of these things, it's a very self-reflective type of process to work through. And you talk to yourself more than you talk to anybody else in the entire world. So to start looking at the conversations you're having with yourself is how you start to change them. The second piece of that, then your time planning, we look at where is your time going? What are your priorities? I use a tool called the Eisenhower Matrix to really help you see what's important and urgent. Because when we treat everything like it's important and urgent, nothing is. So to really see what's important and urgent, what's not important but urgent, what's important but not, what's urgent but not important, and then what's neither. What are the
right.
things you can delegate? So there's a whole process for that, as well as then the last part of your self-care, and looking at self-care in a different way, because so many times people think of it as this luxury, as it's nice to have, like a spa day or a getaway, which is great. But doing one thing on Saturday, and that'd be like eating on Sunday and not thinking you're starving by Tuesday. You can't do one thing on Saturday and think you don't need self-care again the next day and the next day and the next day. And so I teach a very practical self-care that focuses on these 8 areas, everything from how you eat, sleep, move, dress, decorate and organize your home, think about money, connect with others, as well as traditional personal development. And then look at micro moments throughout your day that you can start integrating these things. So they're not these massive practices that you need a lot of time for, that you have to do alone or by yourself. You can do things with other people that create some of those moments of self-care, because self-care isn't just being about calm, it's about your energy and how you have that confidence in how you show up to situations. So when you start to change that energy around yourself, when you're excited about something you're wearing, or you just had a fun song play and you did a little dance, that's part of that self-care that you bring to everybody else around you. And so recognizing how those 3 pieces work together to then create kind of that work life balance and harmony, because you're not lost between your work or your life. Those moments of you are infused throughout your entire day.
Yeah. And that's a good point too. Self-care does not always necessarily mean you're by yourself. I guess it kind of depends on your personality. But if you have a group of people that are just really supercharged and energized, fun to be around, it's enough, right? To help you get your mind off of other things and bring you up to a different level or a different place.
Yeah, and just even if you are on your own sitting in a coffee shop, say, you're by yourself, but the energy of being around other people is still connecting, even if it isn't in a very direct way. So you don't
Yeah.
have to be a super extrovert to do these kind of things. It's still how you're connecting with others in the world.
Yeah, and a lot of that, like I said, depends on the different personalities. You got ambiverts,
Mhm.
extroverts, introverts, just depends on what your jam is, right?
Yeah, yeah, but I think, we take that self part of self-care a little too literally sometimes,
Hmm.
and recognizing, self-care can be loud, it can be laughter. It's not all about being quiet and zen. It's, a form of energy that helps you feel good about yourself.
Right, depending on what resonates with the
Mhm.
person. So, when you have people journaling and doing that or bringing your emotions, do you ever have to remind them to be honest with
Mhm.
themselves, or do you feel like they might be just telling you what they think you want to hear?
Yeah, there's layers of it, obviously, and it takes some time to get comfortable with that vulnerability, not only in front of other people, but with yourself. And, that's why they call these things a practice, because it does take that repetition and that practice to really start to get comfortable in doing those things, to start letting go of those stories, to start letting go of the things we need to hide, and to be able to just get comfortable in our own thoughts and skin is, it's a part of that process, which is why this isn't an overnight one and done type of thing. It is something that takes a little time, but the investment is definitely small compared to the rewards that you get out of it.
Yeah, it's amazing how we get in this society where we wanted everything yesterday. We've
Mhm.
spent years creating all this damage, yet we want a magical wand to like make it go away. And it's like, well, if it took you years to get there, I'm not saying it's going to take them years to fix it, but it
No.
does take work. And then, like you said, it's not going to be overnight.
Yeah, absolutely. But these practices, they build on each other. Like I said, you start small and sustainable. So it doesn't necessarily feel like work,
Hmm.
because nobody wants to do anything that's hard or feels like extra work. You build them in small, sustainable ways that they just start to become part of how you're rolling through each day.
Yeah. So, what is the most like unexpected source that you've ever discovered that relates to burnout?
The unexpected source of
Yeah.
burnout. Like I said, I think people don't recognize how their passions are. Being a mom, you think, going all in on your kids and keeping that as your whole focus is what makes you a good mom. Or being a business owner, you think, okay, if I spend all my time here and I'm on call and I'm available all the time, that's what's going to make me a good business owner, or things like that. And recognizing that our passions are the scary point of what we don't realize can set us up for burnout, because we're kind of maybe having fun along the way. We're enjoying it, but again, not recognizing that too much of even a good thing is still too much.
Okay. I wasn't sure if that was like one of the most unexpected ones or if there was something like just off the wall that you would not have thought of that maybe, you could think of.
Yeah,
But
no, because
yeah.
everyone has their own kind of like passion for what could be their trigger.
Right. Because what could be burnout for somebody may not be burnout necessarily for someone else.
Exactly.
Yeah. I've interviewed and been with a couple of folks that are what you call high functioning,
Hmm.
where they just, I'm like, it makes me exhausted just hearing everything that they're into covering and how they do. And I mean, some people think that about me, but I'm like, oh, I'm nothing compared to some people that I've met. So,
Right. And there's no, one formula. For some people, functioning at that level is what works for them. Like you said, because there's different even personality types of where their energy comes from.
mhm.
If you're a high extrovert, sometimes some of those high intensity, social types of things can seem overwhelming to one type of person, but that's where somebody else would get their recharge from.
Yeah. I would think as a coach for doing helping somebody with that, it's got to be kind of hard almost to step away from yourself and, meet them where they're at. But obviously you do because, yeah, I would have trouble wrapping my head around some of that, but I would think it would almost be kind of difficult to.
Well, I mean, and I don't have that judgment. It's,
Right.
I think by taking some of the emotion out of it from my end, and this is about, the person and focusing on what works for them and what feels good to them, and allowing for the flexibility that even what feels good for them today might not feel good for them next month. And so it's kind of always a process, which is why having kind of a larger kind of toolbox, so to speak, of different places to pull from allows for that flexibility of what's working on a given day in a given season of your life. And it's going to change just like we continue to change and grow over time. But having these 8 pillars then allows you the flexibility to kind of hone in on where some of your strengths are and incorporating them in different ways. So it can look different on different days. It can be different time frames, different lengths of times, different ways they happen, even if you still have the consistency of the fact that it's still happening every single day.
Yeah, definitely. And I know we need to go in more into the 8 pillars and strategies of what people can do to start reclaiming that. But we're going to take a break for a word from our sponsors, and we will be right back.
Hi, I'm Bobby Aldridge with BAM Metrics. There are so many programs out there that measure your swing speed, sets, reps, your BMI, your body fat, but the one thing they're not measuring that's so essential is mobility. Mobility is the key. If you're measuring your mobility, your performance will get better and you will reduce your pain. I created BAM Metrics to make it easy for people to repeat the exercises so they could do it properly at home on their own. It's simple, it's easy to do, and from a senior to a pro athlete.
Relief for PTSD, anxiety, pain, insomnia, and many other ailments. Introducing Vibe, the world's only pocket PEMF device. You place it in your pocket while cooking, cleaning, relaxing, watching TV, sitting at your computer, reading, or walking. Self-contained standalone device. No drugs. No other phone or Bluetooth connections required. No monthly subscription fees. No apps to download. No Bozone. The future of medicine is in the frequencies. Come join the revolution.
What you talked about the 8 pillars. What 8 pillars are you referring to?
Yep. So they involve everything from how you sleep, how you eat, how you move, how you dress, how you decorate and organize your home, how you connect with others, how you think about money, as well as then traditional forms of personal development like journaling, meditation, mindfulness, those types of practices.
Nice. Okay. So what, and in all those practices, and we've mentioned self-care and mindfulness, what are some of the ones that you do and you practice or that you could suggest to others?
Yeah. So one of the ways I incorporate self-care is I bookend my day with me. So my mornings start with me and my evenings end with me. And it varies again based on what I have going on a given day, how much time I have, and what it looks like. But for me, I always incorporate some form of movement, but there's everything from 4-minute HIIT workouts to 5-minute meditation practices to 10-minute yogas. Sometimes I can do 30 minutes, 40 minutes, but on the days that I can't, I still make sure that it happens in whatever way it needs to look like. And then how I end my days, I always do my skincare routine. I put on some lotion on my hands, and then I always read from an actual book. And again, that can vary. Some days it's 3 sentences, maybe it's 3 paragraphs. Some days I can do 3 chapters, but it allows the fact that it happens and the consistency of these actions versus looking at the quantity of how long the time is where you're really going to start to get those benefits, because over time you'll find, even taking 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there throughout your day might not give that overarching huge sense of like, now I'm totally calm. But over time, you're able to fall into these practices so that you can respond rather than react when something unexpected happens or life comes up in a way you didn't plan for.
Yeah. And I like that because I've always told people, you start out small, don't, because everybody thinks, oh, I got to have an hour. Well, no, you don't necessarily if you don't have in your time, because when it's really overwhelming, right, people don't start at all.
Right.
But I never even thought about that. Anything you do, like you said, even if it's micro and little, it's better than just not doing it at all.
Yeah, when I start people out, sometimes we start with the simplest thing where I have them set a reminder on their phone to go off, and you do that for 5 times throughout the day. And then when the reminder goes off, you set a timer for 1 minute, just 1 minute. And I don't want you to do anything on social media. Don't go throwing a load of laundry or anything. Just sit there for 1 minute. Focus on your breathing, maybe look out the window and notice some of the things around you, do some shoulder shrugs, have a glass of water, but definitely just take 1 minute and you'll find studies, actually science has shown in that 1 minute, cortisol levels start to go down, heart rate decreases. So your stress levels start to go down, as well as you get the dopamine hit of setting a goal and achieving it. And now you have a 5 minute self-care practice, and that's where you can start super small and then build. Maybe you're sitting there for 1 minute and you're like, you know what? I've got 2 minutes today. I can do this for 3 minutes. And now, you've built a 15-minute practice. So there's so many ways to just start super small. Maybe then for one of those 3 minutes, you say, I'm going to do a 5-minute walk outside, or I'm going to get together with a coworker and we're going to take a 2-minute walk. There's so many simple ways to start integrating that in. Maybe you're going to listen to your favorite song, a podcast, call a friend or text them real fast and connect with others. There's just a lot of ways to start including these micro moments throughout your day. Just like we recharge our phones consistently throughout our day, you recharge yourself throughout your day and you won't end feeling like you're at zero.
Right. Yeah. I've always told people, it's like, celebrate your little wins, because we're always really good at, beating ourselves up. But like you mentioned, when you keep in that going and you're not doing the self-care, cortisol is a huge issue.
Yeah.
For the stress. Do you want to address kind of what that does on people?
I'm not an expert in cortisol. I know I have my own personal struggles with it even still.
Sure.
And just the inflammation it causes, it causes that inflammation in your body. And so it disrupts physically how you're regulating things, how you're maybe digesting things, how you're storing, your stress in a lot of ways. And so by decreasing your cortisol levels, by releasing that stress and decreasing your heart rate, it puts less kind of stress on your overall body, as well as physically and mentally, because I think people underestimate that mind-body connection, which is why I love to tie together, like I said, physical fitness and mental fitness, because when you're not in a good place physically, we know to go to a doctor, we take action, but we don't recognize that when we're not in a good place mentally, that could be causing some of our physical symptoms.
Yeah. So can you tell us how it's been being a single mom and a busy entrepreneur and doing all this? How has that been for you?
It's been a process, and like I said, I started my journey 20 years ago. Yeah, over 20 years ago. And my kids are adults now. They're in their 20s. I've been remarried for the last 16, almost 17 years to an amazing man, So, I've been able to rebuild parts of my life, but I've also found along the way by doing these practices, and, it's not perfect, but I've shown up in a different way. My kids have learned not just what I need and how I need to be treated, but how to take care of themselves. Kids are always going to do what we do more than what we say. And so they've learned, now that they're adults, how to take care of themselves, how to manage their stress, how to put themselves on their to-do list every day so that they don't get lost in the shuffle of it all, how to be treated in relationships. So I think it's definitely, been a process. And there's days, I had my hot mess moments. And I think allowing ourselves that grace for progress over perfection. There was a quote I saw that's like, we're all just humans and this is our first time trying life. And, and I think our kids forget that. And we forget that sometimes when we're parents or adults. And it's like, this is all still new. And, so continuing to work on it. But I think just that grace of, there's days that look better than others, and always keep going in that right direction. Keep making progress, keep growing, keep learning about yourself, because you keep changing and what's going to work for you and how to incorporate that.
Yeah. So you had a routine figured when you were a single mom and working on all this. You had a routine for your self-care, your mindfulness. And then, of course, they got older and you got remarried. So When your life changed, did your routines change?
Yes and no. There's parts of it that absolutely didn't change, and it was kind of good. Like this is part of who I am. So I brought those pieces into my relationship. Because I think a lot of times we think our boundaries need to always be negative, but for those boundaries, that's how I show up as my best self by keeping those boundaries around some of my time, how I bookend my day, and those types of things. So I just kind of communicated those boundaries, not in a way like nobody talked to me, I'm busy doing my self care, but like, hey, this is how I wind down at night. I need this time. So thanks. Love you guys. Talk to you later.
Don't have the big keep out sign. You turn over and you're to keep out. Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, like I said, some of it's learned now. That's kind of how we all decompress at night. We plug in our phones, we go to our rooms, we do our things at night, and I think just kind of helping each other. There's things I've learned, from my husband and his kids as well. We've learned from each other, and it all kind of works together. I think when nobody feels that resentment of like they're compromising themselves in a way, because that's never healthy to bring that into a relationship.
Right.
So I think, when you have those boundaries in place, they're good for you and everyone, because if you don't have those boundaries and you regret it, you resent it, that's going to find its way in, as opposed to holding a boundary and finding a way to make it work for everyone.
Yeah. So we've talked about boundaries quite a bit. What kind of boundaries do you set? What kind of boundaries do you go by?
I definitely, like I said, I set boundaries around my morning and my nighttime routine, that they're going to happen, even if they're not for a long time. I set some boundaries just around not only what I'm going to say no to, but also what I want to say yes to. And sometimes boundaries aren't always about doing what feels comfortable. It's about, pushing the boundary, stretching outside of the comfort zone. So those are some of the ones, whether it's going to networking events by myself, not knowing anybody in the room, doing different activities that maybe my friends aren't interested in, but I really want to do. And, saying yes to me is one of those boundaries that I've over time and practice have gotten more and more comfortable with, but it definitely is, it's a journey.
Yeah. So to keep the burnout from coming back up, you have boundaries like when it comes to work, where after a certain time you're done. You don't like, because there's a lot of entrepreneurs that just feel like, oh my God, I got to answer this now. I got to answer this now. I got to do this now. And I mean, they're like working into the night and doing different things. It affects their sleep.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is based on some of the stories we tell ourselves. Like, in order to hang on to customers, we need to be available 24/7. But if you think about like your favorite restaurant, your favorite coffee shop, it has hours. There's only certain times you can go in there to get the things you want. It's the fact that those hours are communicated, they're on their website, you know when to access them, is how you then have that good relationship with them versus, you show up at 10 o'clock on a Saturday and they're never open, 9 o'clock on a Sunday, they're never open, because they haven't communicated what their hours are. So when you communicate your boundaries, that frees you and the people around you. So if I have an outgoing message that says, thanks so much for reaching out, I respond within 24 hours, or these are the hours I respond within, they're not going to be sitting there stewing going, oh my gosh, I didn't hear anything, because they know what they're going to get back from me. And I'm not going to feel guilty like I have to check and make sure I didn't miss anything.
Right.
Again, so communicating those boundaries, and that could be an auto reply on your emails, that could be your outgoing voicemail. There's ways to communicate your boundaries so that it feels good for you and everybody around you as well. Sometimes shutting off notifications on your phone so you're not tempted to even take a peek. If you work from home, shutting down your laptop, putting it in a closet. There's ways, to kind of get that temptation out of the way, just so you start to put those boundaries in place. And once you do them consistently, people almost expect it. They'd almost be surprised to hear back from outside of your normal hours, because you've conditioned them to know, oh, she doesn't respond on weekends.
Yeah. And I love that, because it's it's always amazing how when you're at home, you think, oh my gosh, I got to do this. I got to do that. It's like, if you go to a store and you're there 5 minutes after close, they're not unlocking the door. They're
Right.
not unlocking the doors for
That's
you.
on you at that point.
Right. Right. So what would you say are some common misconceptions about the time management that can lead to feelings of overwhelm?
Yeah. I think thinking again, besides the fact that everything's important and urgent, that everything, has to get done by you. is another part. So thinking everything's important and urgent and has to happen today. That's not the case when you really start to look at those tasks and break them down. Thinking you need to be the sole person to do them all is another trap we fall into, and not appreciating the power of delegating, not only to free you up, but to empower somebody else too. There's people out there who want to do the things that you want to give them to do, whether it's helping you for free with your kids, your business, something like that. There's an intern out there, somebody that's looking for the experience that you can give them. There's somebody out there looking to wash your kids. There's also, services. There's laundry services, meal services. There's ways to delegate and take yourself out as the sole person responsible for taking care of everything. And that can be hard, whether you like things done a specific way, and kind of working through that mindset piece of it. Whether you think you're the only person who can do it, or just even, again, those negative stories of, well, what will people think if I'm not the one doing it, if I'm hiring someone out, and all those assumptions, which 99.99999% of the time are never true. Nobody else thinks that except for you. And so being able to work through and let go of those pieces of your time, as well as then thinking we have to stack our calendars on top of each other. I love putting buffer space in between, like I said, the different activities in my calendar, because number one, if life happens, it gives me that space in between so that I'm not running late. I'm not feeling extra stressed or pressured between different tasks, but also it allows then, if nothing goes wrong, I've got 10, 15 minutes that I can now catch up with a friend, listen to a podcast, do any of the things that I want to do for me, and have the time and freedom in my day so that I can do that throughout my day.
Yeah. And I think that's a challenge for a lot of people. I mean, on the entrepreneur side, for one, when you've worked so hard to build something, sometimes it's hard to let go to somebody else because you're afraid of that, if they make the wrong move, it could damage everything that you do. But then again, yeah, there's always risks and everything, right?
Absolutely. And I think, just recognizing that being able to take time to rest and have that space in our calendar, and see it not as a restrictive thing by having a schedule, by having habits, by having boundaries, that they're not negative things, but that by then, resting is relaxing. Being able to reframe, what the benefits are, is how we can take just a different view of our time. An analogy, I love analogies as well, that I've also heard, is thinking of our time the same way we think about money, because once you spend your time, you can't get it back. Whereas with money, we can always earn more money, and yet we're so intentional with the way we save it, invest it, use it, plan for how we're going to use it, and all those kind of things. And we don't take that same approach with our time when it's actually a more scarce commodity and more valuable than money. Why don't we take that same intention with how we plan to use it, how we are investing it, where it's going, and all that type of thing, and just being more aware and accountable for it. We keep budgets for our money. We should be budgeting our time too.
Yeah. Daniela, how would you define self-care and mindfulness?
Well, they're two different things. Mindfulness, I definitely see as the practice of just being present in the moment. I heard a quote once that said, you can't take a past breath, you can't take a future breath, you can only take a present breath, which is why I love the practice of breathing and mindfulness and grounding in your senses. But self-care, I think people just assume it's just being calm and relaxed, but I love self-care as a way of recharging and creating our own energy and our confidence. So doing things that light us up, bring us confidence, bring us energy. And when we feel that energy and that confidence, that's where some of that calm comes from. Because a lot of times insecurities, fear can look like anger because we're afraid of how other people are going to react. We're afraid of how we'll respond. But when we're confident, we can then be able to show up in a different way and be able to respond rather than react in a way that just feels better, that we don't regret and feel like we have to undo.
Yeah. What kind of tips do you think you could give people, like for mindfulness when they're busy, and how they can use it to calm that chaos with the burnout?
Yeah, mindfulness, it's, again, those brief moments, you can really start to tap into that mindfulness. You think of, you make your coffee in the morning potentially. Think of how it smells when you pour the beans in. Think of how it sounds when it starts to percolate and drip. Think of, what it smells like when you're bringing the cup up to your mouth, how warm the mug feels in your hand, what it tastes like, those types of things. And so it's not even just thinking about it, but doing that intentionally. That takes like 30 seconds to 1 minute in the morning. That's a mindfulness practice right there. And so many times doing these mundane kind of habit based activities, but with a different intention and a different focus, all of a sudden changes the benefits around it. You think of, when you go to a spa, it has a certain scent, it has a certain sound, it has a certain it brings in all those senses in the same way. So you can start to create those same experiences for yourself. Like I love making homemade air pop popcorn and standing in front of it and not too close to get burned, but just smelling the popcorn, feeling the warm air, hearing the sound of the popcorn popping, it just kind of is a practice for me that knows I'm going to be sitting and relaxing and watching something fun. And so then you can then bring these practices in. So as you do that, when you hold a warm mug, you smell your coffee, maybe throughout your day, if you're having a cup of coffee, it can bring you back to that same piece of when you're home and in your morning. So a lot of these practices, they're creating muscle memories, the mindfulness ones especially. They create those muscle memories so that then when you visualize, say, sitting on a beach or doing something relaxing or fun, over time, you actually experience those same feelings so much quicker because you've practiced them a lot.
Yeah, and you just reminded me of it. Mindfulness comes in even when you're eating, because there's sometimes most of the times, a lot of people were so busy. It's like, oh my God, I haven't eaten. And you eat real quick. And it's like, okay, did you even taste it? Or, you didn't take the time to chew it. You probably didn't take a time to appreciate the taste or the textures or anything about it. We just go. When actually, if you be mindful, right, you're chewing it more, which helps your digestion and everything else. So there's actually a lot to mindfulness in a lot of things.
Oh yeah, but by definitely just focusing on your senses, whether it's an activity you're doing, breathing, looking out the window and nature, the benefits of nature as a form of mindfulness, all those types of things. There's just so many, even subconscious things that we don't even recognize, but we do still get the benefits from.
Yeah. So Daniela, do you work with solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, men, women? Who do you normally work with?
I work with men and women. I do, whether you're a business owner or you work for somebody else, they do corporate trainings as well as part of creating that wellness culture in whatever job you're in and helping that leadership maintain that culture so that you're not feeling like, okay, this was a great one and done, but the whole, experience on a day-to-day basis, you're feeling like it's supported and encouraged to take care of yourself, because definitely whether you own the business or you work for somebody else, doing these practices to prevent that burnout increases productivity, increases success, increases revenue, decreases sick time, decreases turnover, those types of things. So there's so many benefits from even like a business standpoint, as well as then that interpersonal benefit of just knowing that you're taking care of each other.
Absolutely. So you go to sometimes businesses or corporations and do like workshops with groups of their people, or with the leaders first, or all together?
All of it. Yeah. And
Yeah.
definitely, like I said, I've seen companies that are investing in this. They're, seeing growth not only within their employees, but in their businesses and their revenue.
Yes, there's very few companies. There's actually one that I visited here in Springfield in Missouri, where when you go in there, they actually have the cornhole game. They have this. They have stuff up. It's a big open space. He's not behind an office. He's got a desk out. And I know from older research, there's a few companies that do that. But when they make it more of a playful, like relaxing area where somebody has something kind of fun that they can do instead of just, go to a break room, go have lunch and come back. Yeah, it opens up for, like you said, a whole lot more creativity, a lot less burnout,
Yeah.
and
And the
make it more
connection and
enjoyable.
relationships you're going to make with your coworkers to collaborate, to work together, to support each other, all of those kind of things.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of businesses, corporations, solo businesses, even entrepreneurs that can definitely use that and incorporate that more, because, yeah, there's a lot of people getting burnout. Your website, bestlife.com, is that the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Absolutely. You'll find all the links to my social media on there. You'll find links to my podcast. that I also have that you were a guest on that'll be coming out in the next couple of weeks. You'll be able to access my book, my blog posts, free resources, as well as any questions you have, you can always email me.
Yeah. And that's great because obviously you've been doing this for a while. You can tell she she really knows what she's talking about. What is a good takeaway that you want everyone to know from this?
Just to give yourself grace. I think a lot of times we go into this and we have the best of intentions and motivation. And then as soon as, we hit an obstacle, we hit a roadblock, it didn't go the way we wanted it to, we give up or we're hard on ourselves and that negative talk can come back again. And to give ourselves just that grace to be human, grace to do progress over perfection and to keep trying and to start again the next day.
Yeah. Progress over perfection, definitely.
Yeah.
For those of that always been heady or perfectionist. But yeah, did we miss anything that is important that you would like to cover?
I'm sure once the camera's off, that's when I think of it. I think we definitely covered a lot and gave your listeners just a lot to think about, a lot to work with. I, don't want to overwhelm too much. So definitely, please, as you process this, if you think of some questions, please reach out.
Yeah. So yeah. So the mindfulness, I think we've covered that with the self-care and the routines.
And I would definitely love to share. I do have a free resource on my website if they want to check that out. It's called the Reclaim Your Time in 10-minute blocks cheat sheet. And it's a great way to not only start to find that 10 minutes to yourself, but to know actually what to do with it. Because if you don't have a plan, you end up doing nothing sometimes, or you scroll on social media or you do load of laundry. But to have over 20 ideas of what to do with just something as small as 10 minutes will kind of make sure that it actually happens. So you can go on my website, click on that, and grab that great free resource.
So will that actually help people maybe identify if they're starting to get burnout? I mean, because we really want to help them detect it earlier, not when they're already in full blown burnout, right?
Yeah, and sometimes it's as simple as even thinking like, when was the last time I saw my friends? When was the last time I knew ahead of time what I was going to eat in that week? So, it's almost the reverse kind of planning in the backwards, where if you don't do any of these self-care things on a regular basis, or you can't remember the last time you did, maybe you're heading then towards that burnout. So sometimes you can't always recognize some of the, oh, I'm cynical. You don't recognize some of those kind of overt things. But if you feel like, you get the Sunday scaries, like, oh, Monday's coming, because you don't have anything fun planned, maybe we need to look at how you're structuring your time so that you're starting off the week with some fun or things like that. So really to be able to see where some of those holes are in your self-care can help you to recognize, okay, I need more of this in my day.
Yeah, and it's that balance. Sometimes I've been known to get too carried away with self care every now and then because I got like lost. It's like, okay, I need a downtime, or I had something going on, and then all of a sudden I look, it's like, oh no, I got this coming up, and all of a sudden
Mm-hmm.
you kind of go back in that mode. But
Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned too, I do have a book that spells all this out as well. It's called Balance Breakthrough, a practical guide for busy professionals to take charge of their work, life, and well-being. And it literally is like a step-by-step guidebook to start this practice for yourself. So if you want to look at the steps, take it slow, one step at a time. It has actionable strategies. It comes with a digital workbook, and it is your personal, like, do-it-yourself guide to setting yourself up for success.
yeah, absolutely. And I love that when you got ones that can kind of work you through it or give you practical steps, things that you can work through and do,
Mm-hmm.
But again, like you said before, you have to be honest with yourself,
Yeah.
right? If you want to get a true picture. And sometimes that's tough for people to take that hard, honest look.
But it can, sometimes too, if people feel like it's easier to do on their own rather than with another person, that's why I wanted to offer this, you know, forum as well, because sometimes you need to try it on your own first to get comfortable before you bring anybody else in.
Yeah. So where do they find your book? Is it on the website or is it on Amazon? Both?
Both. Yep. Yep. So there's the link on my website, or you can go directly to Amazon and put in either my name or Balance Breakthrough.
Nice. Yeah, balance breakthrough. That that's a good thing. I've had people that say, "Well, there is no such thing as balance. They'd rather call it harmony."
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has their own, meanings, and I don't know if we'll ever hit true balance because we're always doing with something. But yeah, if you can at least be even keeled or have some kind of harmony about it,
Well, and when I
right?
talk about balance, it's not about everything being equal, because I don't think it can be. But
Mhm.
balance comes from your ability to adapt, pivot, have resilience, and then have boundaries. And so, that's where you start to find that balance, is by not losing yourself in the ups and downs of your day, by not losing yourself in your work completely or your life completely. You're still a part through all of that.
Yeah, adapt and pivoting is big, and I know some people that just don't do it well. They freak out over it. I guess being military, you kind of have no choice. It's adapt and overcome, and
Mhm.
you pivot. But
Yeah,
yeah,
when you can adapt and pivot, then it's, you can roll with life a little bit more than thinking there's only one way to do something.
yeah, we have a few minutes left. So, is there a strategy? So, for people that do struggle with pivoting or adapting, is there a tip that you could give them or a strategy that would help them maybe shift that?
Um, Definitely it's a mindset based strategy that we would work on, and thinking of how, when something goes wrong, say you're trying to get out the door and you spill your coffee on the way out, recognizing what are the thoughts you're thinking is how we can start to rewrite the narrative of, taking what do you think when something goes wrong, and then being able to start reframing what is it, what it could it be, what does it actually mean, why do you get upset when something goes wrong that's out of your control, and breaking it down. So there is a little bit of, like I said, that self reflection. So it's not, again, a quick fix, but start to think of, okay, if something's not going the way you planned, what are your thoughts, why are you thinking that? What would you respond if somebody else was saying that to you? And that's a big piece of mindset, because we're so much kinder to other people than we are to ourselves. So, to even take it from that perspective, like if somebody else said that to you, what would you say? Would you say, oh my gosh, yeah, you never have it together. You're always so, running late. You're always a failure, all those kind of things? No. So what would you say to somebody else? And then why wouldn't you say that to yourself? And to be able to start to talk to yourselves as kindly as you would someone else is how you can start to reframe and, handle some of those ups and downs and be able to adapt and pivot a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely practice the positive self-talk because,
Yeah,
like you said, we we beat ourselves up a lot.
right. And we talk to ourselves more than anyone else, so we may as well learn how to be kind to us.
Yeah, we might as well compliment ourselves, right?
Yeah, that self-love, that self-compassion, self-care. Again, it doesn't mean about isolation, but it means being as good to ourselves as we are to somebody else. And, we are probably so much kinder to everybody else around us than we are to ourselves. So starting to internalize that and do those practices, however you need to remind yourself. Like I have sticky notes on my bathroom mirror, those positive affirmations and some statements to help just reinforce that. And there's a science too. You're creating new neural pathways in your brain. And when have thoughts, they're going to go down those default thoughts that you've done for years. It's kind of like going hiking. You go down the path that's been traveled for years that's easy to follow. So when you're creating a new neural pathway, a new way of thinking, a new kind of view or approach, it takes that practice and repetition so that it becomes the new default.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Danielle, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your journey and all of those tips for people, because I know there's a lot of people out there that are burnt out, overwhelmed. So I
No,
hope
thank
they got
you.
a lot, because I was like, we're helping them ditch the overwhelm. So thank you for helping them do that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Laura, for having me today.
Thank you. Everybody have a wonderful, mindful Monday, and we will see you next week.
Bye.